A beautiful, wealthy girl accidentally becomes pregnant and is abandoned by her boyfriend. To avoid bringing shame to her family, her father finds her a simple man from the countryside. From the very first meeting, he was stunned by Livy's exquisite beauty. He was so nervous he didn't dare to look at her directly, didn't even dare to breathe. His hand trembled unceasingly as he poured water. Livy, however, did not shy away, getting straight to the point. "Do you love the baby in my belly?" Ray, without a hint of hesitation, gave an affirmative answer. Just like that, after less than 10 minutes of meeting, the two walked down the aisle together. The wedding, which should have been grand and sacred, was indescribably simple. Ray's sister and brother-in-law served as witnesses, while the pastor's wife sat to one side, playing the piano. Even though the church had only that many people, even though Ray was so nervous he forgot to prepare the rings, the pastor still solemnly completed the ceremony. For Livy, the wedding ring didn't matter either, because all of this was just to deal with her father. In the depths of her heart, she still remembered the faithless man who had abandoned her. However, fate is always full of drama. Livy could not have imagined that in just a few short months, she would be conquered, bit by the sincerity of this farmer. After the wedding, Livy sat in a farm truck for half a day to reach Ray's farm. Looking into the distance, it was the only house in sight. Even the nearest neighbor was Ray's sister's house, a full 13 kilometers away. The moment she stepped out of the truck, Livy's exquisite high heels looked so out of place amidst the weed-filled dirt. A completely unfamiliar environment and a husband she had just met made her undeniably tense. But Ray tried to reassure her, finding ways to soothe the anxiety in her heart with his gentleness and thoughtfulness. Ray politely opened the door of the house and spoke to Livy. Livy was slightly stunned, then stepped into the house. It was clear she still couldn't fit in, but this place didn't seem as bad as she had imagined. Although it looked rather plain, everything in the house was neatly and tidily arranged by Ray. As soon as they entered the room, Ray eagerly began showing her around. To even make Livy feel as familiar as she would in the city, he not only bought a refrigerator and cold Coca-Cola, but also installed a water heater in the bathroom. He also carefully prepared the room with the best light in the house for her, while he himself stayed in a cramped spare room. To welcome Livy, Ray had poured all his heart into it. It was then that Livy realized this seemingly rough man was so meticulous and thoughtful. Life ahead didn't seem so difficult after all. Yet, during their very first meal together, the problems between them were exposed. When it came to cooking, Livy frankly said she didn't know how, but she could borrow a cookbook to learn. But then she learned the library was an hour's drive away. When it came to education, Livy, a graduate student specializing in archaeology, spoke of the ruins of Troy she was studying, but Ray understood nothing at all. Even trying to make conversation only made them both more awkward. To ease the stiff atmosphere, Ray could only take the initiative to stand up and clear the dishes. His thoughtfulness made Livy a bit flustered, and finally, unable to hold back, she voiced the doubt in her heart. "Why did you agree to marry a pregnant woman like me?" Her voice was full of helplessness and confusion, as if the mistake she had made was unforgivable. Ray told her, "When the pastor came to find me, I thought this must be God's will." This answer from Ray had a meaning too profound, leaving Livy momentarily unsure of what else to ask. All her doubts seemed to become petty, selfish. As night fell, the two quietly returned to their separate rooms. Ray carefully recorded in his journal the details of his first meeting with his wife, not wanting to miss a single thing. On the other side, Livy, still not used to country life, took out the earrings her sister had given her, trying them on again and again. Then she opened the locket on her neck. Inside was a picture of her ex-boyfriend in a majestic military uniform. The aching nostalgia, mixed with the self-pity of her reality, made Livy unable to stop herself from sobbing. She thought she would be sleepless all night, but unexpectedly, Livy slept soundly until she woke up. Ray, like a true farmer, had woken up early at sunrise. When Livy went to his room, Ray had long since gone somewhere. Curious about everything about this man, she entered Ray's room and saw that everything was very tidy. In the closet were only a few simple sets of clothes, and the drawer neatly held his small belongings. A ticking pocket watch strangely drew Livy's attention. Just then, there was a noise outside. It must be Ray returning. She hurriedly closed the drawer and went downstairs to greet her husband. A muddy dog clinging to him made Livy a little uncomfortable. It turned out Ray had woken up early to go to town to buy food. Livy suggested she'd like to drive out for a spin, and while there, use the phone in town to let her family know she was okay. But Ray refused, saying the truck was very difficult to drive, and insisted he would take her. Livy's expression was a bit sour. She suspected Ray was monitoring her, but didn't feel it was right to say so. On the way to town, Looking at the vast fields outside the window, Livy offered to help with some farm work, but unexpectedly, she was refused by Ray once again. Being rejected twice in a row made her think. When they got to town, Livy called her sister to tell her she was safe. Her sister said bluntly, "If that man is bad, I'll come get you immediately." Livy turned her head to look at Ray and then said, "He's all right." However, what she was more concerned about was whether there was any news of her ex-boyfriend. While Livy was on the phone, Ray went to the library. He not only borrowed a cookbook, a book on newborn care, but in the end, also chose a book about the archaeology of Troy. Because he not only wanted to take care of Livy, but he also wanted to step into her world. On the way back, Ray took the initiative to teach Livy how to drive. It was only then she realized, to be honest, this old, dilapidated truck was really not easy to drive at all. It seemed Ray was not intentionally monitoring her. Fortunately, Livy was very smart. As the truck slowly started and ran steadily on the road, for the first time, Livy broke into a radiant smile. Looking at the people working outside the window, Livy asked curiously, "Do they all work for your farm?" Ray replied, "That's right. They all work for our farm." Hearing the word "our," Livy did not respond because she still couldn't get into character. Besides teaching her to drive, Ray had many other kind gestures. One day when they went to church for service, a few town gossips began to openly inquire about the beautiful new bride from out of town. They were curious about how the two had met and fallen in love. Seeing this, Ray proactively stepped forward to help her escape the circle of gossip and took her away from that place of idle talk immediately. For the first time, Livy felt cherished. However, in her heart, she still couldn't forget that faithless man. When Ray wasn't paying attention, she secretly sent a letter. She still couldn't let go of the past. Perhaps noticing that Livy was always melancholic, on a beautiful day, Ray specially took her boating on the lake. Livy loved this feeling. She comfortably took off her shoes, closed her eyes, and quietly enjoyed everything. Her slender figure made Ray unable to stop himself from stealing glances again and again. At that moment, he only wished that time could stop at this instant. When he said that he came here only hoping Livy could relax, her heart rippled like the surface of the lake. Gradually adapting to life here, Livy began to venture out of the house and into the fields. That day, she happened to meet two Japanese Americans at the farm. Due to the Pearl Harbor incident, they were implicated and sent to an internment camp for management. Now they were assigned to Ray's farm for reform through labor. Even so, they still managed to use their spare time to observe and document species of butterflies among the wildflowers in the fields. Livy chatted very happily with the two sisters, but soon they had to return to work. As they parted, Livy even invited them to visit her home next time. Life seemed to be gradually getting better. However, a prenatal checkup made her restless and uneasy. The due date was much earlier than she thought, at the earliest only in the 5th month after their marriage. Stepping out of the hospital, Livy was extremely upset. Others hearing about it would surely gossip, saying Ray was an unlucky man. But Ray was completely unconcerned with the opinions of others. He believed that people wouldn't speak ill because everyone would wish for them to be happy. Hearing this, Livy felt a little better. Noticing Ray's meticulous care all this time, Livy decided to personally go into the kitchen to show off her skills. Looking at her busy back, Ray suddenly had a desire to hold her in his arms. But seeing Livy was tense, he still tactfully kept his distance. Looking at the rather eye-catching chili fried eggs, Ray eagerly tasted a bite. Immediately, his face turned red from the spice. Yet when Livy asked how the food was, he still endured the spiciness and praised it as delicious. Then Ray secretly took a large gulp of cold water. While Livy wasn't looking, fortunately, the roar of an engine in the yard saved Ray's life. Livy stepped out of the room and discovered an excavator. It turned out that on the day they went boating, she had only idly mentioned that she liked to swim, yet Ray had etched it in his heart. This time, he planned to dig a swimming pool in front of the house so that next summer, Livy and the children could swim and play. Livy couldn't believe that in his future plans, there was not only her, but also the child who had no blood relation to him. Ray's sister's entire family came to lend a hand. The niece kept marveling at this aunt from the city. The little girl innocently asked about Livy's locket, but was immediately interrupted by her mother, who taught her not to be curious about other people's private matters. Clearly, the children knew nothing about their aunt's situation. From her conversation with her sister-in-law, Livy learned that Ray was trying to please her and that this entire family wanted to share their warmth with her. However, deep in her heart, she was still not ready to accept it all. That day, Ray took Livy to his sister's birthday party. Livy showed reluctance to go, using the excuse that she didn't know how to dance. Ray comforted her, saying it was enough just to be there. Livy continued to express her view. "Aren't you curious about the outside world? When she heard Ray say he liked to sleep on his own land, she replied contemptuously, "Humans are only temporary guardians of the land. Besides, your family has only owned this land for 100 years in the long river of history. What is 100 years?" But Ray replied, "In my short life, it is everything." A sentence that plunged Livy into thought. Perhaps she had broad knowledge, but he had depth in his perception of life. At the dance, seeing everyone dancing on the floor to stay with Livy, Ray lied that he didn't want to dance either. But his hand, unconsciously tapping to the beat of the music, betrayed him. Perhaps not wanting to disappoint him, for the first time, Livy took the initiative to ask him for a dance. As soon as he stepped onto the dance floor, Ray seemed to transform into a different person. Though he usually looked honest and simple, he was a very good dancer. It seemed he used actions to express his feelings, which was why his words became clumsy. Livy followed Ray's rhythm, immersing herself in the joyful party. The sincere blessings from his sister's family made Livy long even more for a happy family life. But that was still an unknown. Simple friendship came much more gently. The two Japanese-American sisters from before came to visit her again. Livy learned that they had both attended university. All being women in distress, and all being highly educated intellectuals, they had countless things to talk about and quickly became close friends. Livy was very happy to have made such friends and couldn't help but share it with Ray. However, Ray's reply was, "They are Japanese," which made Livy uncomfortable. Although Ray explained that he was not prejudiced against them and he knew they had nothing to do with the Pearl Harbor incident, Livy still did not accept it. "You will never understand the joy of talking to them about things that aren't crops." It turned out, after all, Livy still felt she had been wronged. Seeing that the situation was not good, Ray immediately fell silent. The two went to his sister's house for dinner. Unexpectedly, as soon as he opened his mouth, his brother-in-law asked if Ray would plant soybeans next year. Ray glanced at Livy, saw that she, a person ignorant of agriculture, just shook her head and ate in silence. At that moment, he realized Livy's presence was too faint. Seeing Ray was pensive and not saying a word, his brother-in-law asked curiously, "What's on your mind?" After a moment of thought, Ray replied, "The story of Troy." Hearing Ray's answer, Livy's eyes widened in astonishment. However, Ray just said a few simple sentences and then stopped, then yielded the floor to Livy. When she got to talk about her major, Livy immediately became animated. After chattering on and on, she began to take an interest in Ray in a similar way. "Will you plant soybeans this year?" Hearing this, Ray smiled with satisfaction. The dinner ended in a cheerful and warm atmosphere. On the way home, the two occasionally looked at each other tenderly. That night when they got home, they wished each other good night on the stairs. Ray stood there for a long time, looking at Livy. But when Ray was about to make a move, Livy stepped back. Even though she had rejected Ray, as the bedroom door closed, Livy's heart couldn't help but panic. In the days that followed, Ray continued to live the life of a farmer. Working at sunrise, resting at sunset, he also used his spare time to read the borrowed archaeology book to enrich his knowledge. Meanwhile, Livy just needed to sit on the bench in front of the house, leisurely reading and nurturing her pregnancy. That day, Livy's sister suddenly came to visit her. She drove a luxury car, dressed splendidly, but when she saw the dusty surroundings and her sister's ill-fitting clothes, she couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Livy warmly welcomed her sister. Her purpose was to persuade Livy to return. It turned out her husband had gone to war. Lonely by herself, she wanted Livy to come live with her for company, and besides, giving birth in the city was more convenient. After giving birth, Livy could continue her studies. After all, she was now free from the trouble of a premarital pregnancy. As for Ray, Livy's sister proposed a terrible idea. They could spread a rumor that he was an alcoholic, abusive, and she had to run away because she couldn't bear it. Hearing that terrible idea, Livy firmly refused. She couldn't bear to slander Ray like that, because he was the kindest man she had ever met. Moreover, her sister had always been selfish. In the past, she had used the excuse of being busy with her wedding to not care for their mother, forcing Livy to drop out of school to come home and take care of her. Seeing that she couldn't persuade her sister, she prepared to return to the city. Before leaving, Livy gave her another letter. This letter was still for her ex-boyfriend. It wasn't that she was hopelessly in love, but because after so long, there hadn't been a single reply. She just wanted a definite answer. Livy told Ray about her sister's thoughts because she felt it was a sign of respect for him. Seeing Livy willingly stay, Ray couldn't help but hum a tune. It was a melody his father used to sing to him. He wanted to practice it in advance to sing to his unborn child later. Time passed, and Livy gradually adapted to life there. She often drove the two sisters around for outings. One day, the sisters discovered that her clothes no longer fit her growing belly. With their sewing skills, They specially made her some well-fitting maternity clothes. The bond between them grew ever closer. One day, on the road, she happened to discover a root cellar. Fascinated by history, she curiously entered, and seeing all sorts of old items, big and small, inside, she felt as if she had found a treasure and brought no small number of things home. Upon returning home, she happily showed her spoils to Ray. But the next day when she came home, she found Ray burning the things she had worked so hard to collect. Livy angrily explained to him, this wasn't trash, it was his family's history. Realizing he was wrong, Ray hurriedly got water to put out the fire. Afterwards, he brought the remaining items to Livy and sincerely apologized. Although he didn't understand why a pile of scrap had become history, he knew these things were very important to Livy. He looked at her tenderly and said, as long as you're happy, I'm willing to do anything for you. Seeing Ray's worried expression, Livy suddenly felt a pang of sympathy. But the next morning, she found a note and a flashlight on the table. The note read, there are more artifacts in our basement, all things you like. But be careful of the dust. When she took the flashlight down to the basement, the pile of old objects stacked there made her as excited as if she had just discovered a new continent. Livy carefully cleaned and brought these antiques into the light, giving the house a rich historical atmosphere. Even a plowshare was hung on the wall. Although he felt it was a bit funny, as long as Livy liked it, Ray was willing. Afterwards, Ray also took Livy to witness the family history that was truly important to him. Looking at the tombstone before her, Livy learned that Ray had a younger brother who had died in the Pearl Harbor incident. His brother had dreamed of becoming a naval officer since he was a child. As long as he stayed on the farm, his brother could fulfill his dream. He had done what an older brother should do, but blamed himself for not going to the battlefield in his brother's place. Livy didn't know how to comfort him. She could only awkwardly pat Ray's back gently. As the two understood each other more deeply, their feelings also gradually warmed. To make it convenient for Livy to contact her family, Ray had a telephone installed at home. Livy also started to plant a small garden of her own. She was also quietly changing for Ray. Winter came suddenly, with heavy snow outside. The dog she had once disliked was now also called into the house by her to escape the cold. Now, the thing she looked forward to most each day was the moment Ray returned home. Seeing the familiar truck slowly appear at the end of the small road, she happily prepared a candlelight dinner. But the man who was always gentle today became unusually irritable. He angrily advanced, grabbed the dog by the neck, and yelled for it to get out. Then he explained angrily, dogs are not allowed in the house. This was a rule passed down from his ancestors. The initial warm atmosphere completely vanished. Livy looked doubtfully at Ray, a man who had never lost his temper before. It wasn't until Ray took out the reply letter from her ex-boyfriend that she woke up as if from a dream. Even she herself had forgotten she had sent a letter to her ex-boyfriend. Ray couldn't bear his sincere feelings being treated so casually. He abruptly abandoned the romantic candlelight dinner. Ray lied that he had to work overtime and once again stepped out of the house into the snowstorm. Looking at Ray's angry back, Livy realized how foolish her mistake was. For the first time, Livy woke up early to prepare breakfast for Ray. Although Ray refused, his voice was still very gentle. Livy wanted to apologize, but instinctively didn't want to mention that letter. So she could only use the dog to express her sincere apology. Then she confessed something else to Ray. When she first arrived, she had secretly looked in his drawer. She was very curious about the pocket watch inside. It turned out to be Ray's father's watch. Every time he saw it, Ray remembered how well his father had treated his mother, and he also wanted to be a gentle man like his father. Livy realized she was wrong. She sobbed incessantly and apologized. Ray was about to turn and leave, but seeing Livy's tear-filled eyes, he felt a pang of heartache, walked over, and tried to kiss her. This was their first kiss. Livy didn't resist, but she didn't respond either. Seemingly sensing her reluctance, Ray softly asked before leaving, "Is there anything about me that you like?" Livy knew she had hurt Ray deeply, but didn't know how to fix it. So she braved the heavy snow to find Ray's sister. Livy recounted everything. It turned out that although the faithless man had replied, he had denied the baby in her womb. Livy had been hurt by him, and now she had hurt the man who treated her with sincerity. Livy's heart was filled with remorse. But in the heart of Ray's sister, there was only pity for her brother. When she heard Livy had decided to leave, she told Livy, "If you want to leave, leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, the longer you stay, the more deeply Ray will be hurt." Livy planned to leave after Thanksgiving. She hoped doing so would make Ray feel better. That night, Livy, filled with guilt, had a nightmare. Her terrified cries woke Ray up. Ray rushed to her room to comfort her. This made Livy even more ashamed. She could only thank Ray for taking care of her. On Thanksgiving Day, Ray and Livy brought gifts to the two sisters. The younger sister unexpectedly pulled Livy aside and suggested that Livy wait for her and her boyfriend to go for a walk. Livy immediately agreed without thinking. At the Thanksgiving dinner table, the whole family prayed together for the war to end soon. But Livy suddenly thanked everyone because in the less than 5 months she had been there, she had felt more love than she had received from her father in 25 years and for the first time felt the warmth of a family. Everyone thought she was just being emotional. Only Ray's sister knew it was a farewell. Returning home, she couldn't bring herself to pack, preparing to fulfill her promise to the younger sister before leaving. But as soon as she got downstairs, she saw Ray waiting at the door. He had broken his ancestors' teaching to let the dog in the house. This was Ray's concession and his plea for her to stay. His eyes were filled with tears, wanting to fight until the end. Ray said to Livy, "Even if you leave, I want you to know that I have fallen in love with you, because you are the best thing that has ever happened to me." He also promised to do his best to bring Livy the happiness and peace she longed for. Saying that, Ray took out from his pocket the ring that had not appeared on their wedding day. He walked up to Livy, earnestly begging her to stay, but Livy did not nod immediately. Her heart was filled with shame and self-blame because she felt that at this moment she was not worthy of Ray. However, Ray's gentle words shattered all the defenses in her heart. "There will come a day when you have to forgive yourself." It turned out that Ray was the one who understood her best, because the person she couldn't forgive all this time was her past self. On the road in the middle of the fields, Livy drove to the meeting point with the two sisters. Looking at the ring on her hand, she unconsciously smiled. She quickly met the two sisters and the younger sister's boyfriend. Although the man wore the uniform of an American guard, the intelligent Livy saw the clues immediately. It turned out this man was not an internment camp guard. She had seen this German prisoner of war at the farm before. The walk they mentioned was just to get him out of the country. Livy realized he didn't love the younger sister at all, only wanted to use her to escape from here. With the experience of someone who had been through it, Livy was extremely clear-headed at this moment. She began to question the younger sister. If he loves you, why doesn't he want to stay? What you're doing is not only harming yourself, but also your family. Helping a prisoner escape is treason. After some persuasion, Livy made the two sisters get out of the car and then said to the man, "It will be less conspicuous to take you alone." Then she drove back to her own home. She lied that his fake uniform couldn't cross the border. "My husband is not at home now. You can go upstairs and change into his clothes." As soon as they entered, she placed the car keys in a conspicuous place. Then, while he went upstairs to change clothes, she quickly took the spare gas can from the car. Next, while making coffee for him, she deliberately created an opportunity for him to steal the keys. Unexpectedly, he indeed fell for the trap. Hearing the engine sound outside, Livy knew he had taken the bait. She immediately picked up the phone to call the police, but just then, her water broke. Despite the pain, she managed to finish the call to the police and then called Ray. As expected, the man ran out of gas halfway and was quickly captured. Here, Livy had set fire to his fake uniform and at the same time, ripped off the locket with the ex-boyfriend's picture and threw it into the fire. At this moment, that woman finally said goodbye to the past. Soon, Ray also rushed home. Livy had given birth to a healthy baby boy. Ray gently took the baby and softly hummed the lullaby his father used to sing to him. Livy quietly watched the scene before her. She knew she had not chosen the wrong person this time. From this moment on, Livy had completely fallen in love with this wonderful, one-of-a-kind man. In a flash, winter passed and spring arrived. The happiness that Livy had planted in front of the house during the first snow last year had blossomed into brilliant flowers. The family of three also began their own archaeological journey on their land. The Magic of Ordinary Days is a 2005 romance film directed by Brent Shields, starring Keri Russell and Skeet Ulrich. Set in rural America during World War II, the film tells a love story that begins with an arranged marriage but ends with a sincere bond. The union between Livy and Ray was initially just a reluctant choice due to social pressure, but the two gradually bridged the distance during the simple days, allowing sincerity and tolerance to sow the seeds of love. Ray used his clumsy but sincere efforts to learn archaeology, dig a swimming pool, and accept the child in her womb. This proved that the essence of love is not grand vows but the endurance of one roof, two people. When Livy finally let go of her intellectual arrogance, smiling at Ray amidst the spring flower garden, the audience suddenly realizes that the most touching romance is the poetry nurtured from the most ordinary things. This film is like a clear mirror, reflecting the true values of life that have been forgotten in this hurried age. While modern people are trapped in sophisticated calculations for personal gain, Ray used his actions to demonstrate that love is eternal patience. He accepted Livy's past and used day-by-day cultivation to turn the barren land in her heart into a green oasis. This almost saintly tolerance revealed a truth. Happiness is not a gift of fate, but the result of an active choice. The flower garden that survived the harsh winter at the end of the film is not only a metaphor for love, but also a metaphor for the meaning of life. All hardships will eventually be brewed into sweet honey by time. Just as the educator Sukhomlinski once said, love is the poetry and the sun of life. And this film tells us that poetry doesn't need to rhyme, and the sun can also rise from the earth. As long as there is a sincere heart, ordinary days will also shine brightly. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this film?